Hi. So I want to continue the conversation about polarity thinking. And the question that we're going to play with today are, or the thing that I'm going to explore today are some applications of polarity thinking. And honestly, we can think about this as just rethinking polarization. Obviously, polarization is a huge issue. We are politically, culturally, socially divided as a country, and actually, most countries are polarized right now. And problem with that is because the way our current democracy is working is it's giving us this for or against us or them kind of voting choices. And that is really part of the problem because it's oversimplifying the crazy complex world that we're in. And so, and we also know it doesn't work. The reason why this is frustrating is because as we are more polarized in this very simple one, two, black, white, binary thinking, that means that we're not able to compromise because compromising, as we understand it, would mean either side giving something up, and no one's going to give anything up right now. There are too many darlings to kill in this one. It also means that we can't choose. We can't choose left or right or this or that because half the population is going to be unhappy about that. And it also means that we can't just come up with a single fixed solution that's going to solve all of our problems. And so that's how we get into the complexity. Now, it's tempting to retreat back to the simplicity of let's just choose and vote again. But actually, there's a more elegant, simple way of doing this. And that is by understanding that these dynamic polarities are in dynamic tension and they're in ongoing tension and they're not ever going to get rid of each other, that we cannot choose. So instead, we have to learn how to manage polarities. And the essence of that is lifting up the good parts and minimizing the bad parts. There's a whole nother video where I talk about polarity management in much more detail, but let's just do a little recap. This is a super simple polarity management grid. And in this grid, you can see there's choice A and choice B. And in this grid, we can fill out the positive qualities of choice A and B, and we can find out the negative or the downsides of choice A and B. And these arrows indicate that if we focus only on A, then we eventually will slide into the negative qualities of A. But the negative qualities of A are solved by the positive qualities of B, which, when taken to an extreme, bring up the negative qualities of B. And then, therefore, we need to go back to A. Now, this means that it's an infinity loop. We can't choose one or the other. And it's so then important for us to figure out how to manage these. So I'm going to tell you about two different groups, organizations, approaches where people are applying polarities to help understand our democracy and our politics and so forth. And they're two really different approaches. So the first one is from the Institute of the Politics of Democracy. And there they define democracy. They use the polarities to define democracy as the dynamic tension between 10 polarities or 10 values. And so there are 5 interdependent polarities that are the essence of democracy. On the other hand, the group, the developmentalists, also the Institute for Cultural Evolution, they're using an approach with polarity thinking to look at our democracy that helps us understand that this is far beyond left and right, that there's actually division within left and right, and that all of them have positive values that we need to lift up, and all of them have a shadow side that we need to be careful about. So I'm going to break those down a little bit and let's see how it goes. So the Institute for the Polarities of Democracy. This was created by a guy named Dr. Bill Bennett and inspired by Barry Johnson, who's the author of Polarity Management. And Bill Bennett took the idea of democracy and developed an amazing academic theoretical framework. And in this, there's basically 5 sets of values, and each of them, like democracy is basically working when we're bringing forward the best of both of these. but democracy is not working if we're choosing one. And so this has actually become a tool that can help to plan, guide, and evaluate social change. So let me tell you about these five polarities of democracy and a little bit about what they're doing, and I'll show you what it looks like. So the 4 or 5 polarities of democracy are these: freedom and authority, justice and due process, diversity and equality, human rights and communal obligations, and participation and representation. The idea is that each of these values are important and have something that needs to be lifted up. And again, we can tell if democracy is working if we can find both of these. But if we find ourselves choosing one or the other, then we're probably in trouble. Now, just to clarify what some of these are, and or at least the way I think about them. So, freedom and authority, of course, as an individual, I have freedom, I have agency, I can do whatever I want. But if I want to be part of a collective, as part of a group, then there are going to be limits on my behavior, and there's certain kinds of authority. And so we can find times when we value authority, and we can find times to value freedom. Now, justice and due process, I find this one related to the question of justice and mercy a little bit. And in his thesis, Bennett makes a point that justice and due process are actually functionally a polarity, but when it comes to meaning, we can kind of think of justice and due process more or less meaning the same thing. So a way you can think about this as is like the tension between like law and order, make the people punishments the way to solve the problems, or do we want to lift up humanity and allow ourselves to be soft on crime? And so that's where that justice and mercy tension comes in. Now, diversity and equality, I think that this one always gets me. And I noticed that part of what's saying right here is that, look, we can either try to make a country and treat everyone differently based on their differences, or we could try to teach everyone the same based on how we're the same, or we can try to all be different, or we can try to all be the same. Either one of those gets really dangerous. And so that tension of some stuff's the same, some stuff's different, makes a lot of sense to me. Human rights and communal obligations. This is really a question about, do I care about the whole, like the bigger world, or am I more focused on my team? And so we can think about this as the tension between my local neighborhood versus my bigger state, or my state versus my country, or my country versus the world. And that's a tricky choice sometimes. And then participation representation. I really am grateful for this because I noticed that in the Omni-Win project, I have a tendency to want to point more towards participation and participatory processes. But honestly, the representative system is really efficient and really great. Um, Sometimes I can think about this one as the tension between centralized and decentralized. And in the sense that we can either distribute all the work and it's going to get a lot slower, or we can centralize it, it'll be faster, but then people aren't engaged. And so, again, these 5 polarities are developed into a wonderful tool and framework. And you can find this at the Institute for Polarities of Democracy website. You can find here it is. It's instituteforpod.org. And here you can see where they break it down. And here's that breakdown that we were just looking at. And this paper explains a bit about all the different pieces here, but it also like explains, do we want this or do we want that? And that's always the answer is yes. When we're always responding to, do we want this or that? The answer is usually yes, or both and. And so, anyways, that is what's going on this website. I do also just want to point out that they have a lot of great resources. This is part of an academic work. And so you can find all sorts of information on their website, study guides, educational materials, a library of theses and case studies. I highly recommend that you check out the Institute for Polarities and Democracy. So if you want to learn more about the applications of polarities and democracies, go check it out, instituteforpod.org. Next, I'm going to talk about how the developmentalist and the Institute for Cultural Evolution, and the really cool way that they are applying polarity thinking to understand our democracy and political culture right now.